and welcome to another episode of the Hey Dr. Kyra Show. My name is Kyra Adams. If we haven't met yet, you're a resident earth scientist that works at a space company that starts with N, ends with A. But this podcast obviously is unrelated to my job. It is produced at a personal capacity, and this has nothing to do with the official viewpoints or opinions of NASA, JPL, or California Institute of Technology. Okay. Now that my first disclaimer is out, I would like to then put in a second disclaimer for today's episode because we're talking about moving scams. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because I nearly got scammed. It took me concentrating every cell of my body to put together a report to get out of the scam. And so the disclaimer is that this is not legal advice. This is a personal, anecdotal story where I just tell you what I did. But if you need detailed legal guidance, please refer to someone else who is a professional in this. I am not authorized to give you legal advice or financial advice or et cetera, but I will just tell you my story and you could go from there. Okay, so today with the moving scams, I'm going to organize the episode into three major portions. The first portion is going to talk about how these companies scam you. Like, how does a scam actually work when it comes to moving? Second is how I actually got out of that. Like, how did I get my money back? What are some of the argument foundations that I used against them to make sure that we could get out of this? And then number three is the actual move that I did, having learned my lesson, the tips and tricks that you can actually apply to your move. So if you're someone who's looking to move and you're not scammed, then feel free to fast forward and listen to the actual tips that might apply to you. But if not, if you're one of those people like me who love to listen to stories about MLMs and you know how people get fooled and you think, oh, they're so dumb, and then you get fooled and now you're trying to navigate, like if you're interested in all that stuff, I love listening to MLM podcasts because I think it's super interesting. Or like true crime podcasts. If you're like me, then feel free to listen and you'll hopefully learn something from it. The reason this has been near and dear to my heart is because I think it actually affects a lot of international students and a lot of grad students. Yes, we all move. So if you're a young adult, most likely you're moving or have moved for schooling, for a job, for an internship, etc., etc. But because we're oftentimes so limited with our finances, we're like the perfect vulnerable targets for these companies. Like, you want to save money on moves, and I always forget how big America is. So these moves are expensive. And because you're limited in funds and you want to like save money, these companies just come after you. So I think this will be applicable to a lot of different people, regardless of whether you're international or an academic or not. So I hope, this gets out there and that people could really, not get scammed. Okay, so again, I don't know how many disclaimers I need to go through this. I'm just trying to like legally protect myself in a culture where people get sued left and right. But this is not obviously meant to put down any profession or any kind of job or any kind of legitimate business. This is specifically going after those predatory companies. So part one, what is a moving scam and what do they actually do? Okay, so we could start with the semantics. These companies, okay, let's actually, before I start, let's pretend, here's a scenario for you. Here's Kyra Kim, 2019. She's lived in Delaware all her 20s. Now she needs to move to fancy LA for her new job. Most people, what they do is look up moving companies near me or moving companies, cross-country move. And then a bunch of these companies will show up, and just like how car insurance works, you kind of put your number somewhere to get a quote or an estimate. They say, click here for an estimate. And you put your information down, and all of a sudden your information is disseminated to all of these different companies. You get quotes left and right? Yeah, you could be really careful and just say, I don't want to forward this number to any other company. But either way, you're going to have to put in your information to get these estimates and these quotes, and you're going to start getting contacted, and they're going to have these really great numbers. So for example, for my move from Delaware to LA, they said it's going to happen within a week or so. And we're quoting you about $1,200. The highest I got was maybe $3,000. but it was all in the low teens. So like 1200, 1700, 1500. That was kind of the range I was looking at. So you're thinking, okay, that's great. I will get reimbursed from a move, which is taxed, by the way. So if you are a grad student and you're getting a quote unquote relocation reimbursement, or, any kind of profession and you're getting a relocation package, that will be taxed. So make sure you factor that into your finances, because you don't want to have to pay taxes on something that you didn't anticipate and you're short on your budget that you didn't think about. Okay, so many sidetracks, so much information that I need to get out there for you guys, because this was one of the hardest things I had to navigate. So you put in your quote and you see like your collection of quotes and you say, okay, this seems to be a great company, and you start going with that company. The problem is these quote unquote moving companies are oftentimes not moving companies. They are moving brokerage companies. This is where things get interesting. This is where the scam part starts. If you think about a moving company and their clients need stuff moved from point A to B, you would think there's people working for the moving company that physically load the stuff into the van. There's drivers, there's fleet, right? There's actual vans as part of the company. These companies do not have any of that. They're just brokerage companies. So what they do is they coordinate your move across different van lines, across different transportation companies, across different drivers, and just try to do a sloppy job and take your money and go. So let's say innocent Kyra, like she actually did, goes with the company and says, hey, I would like to move with you. What's my estimate? And they'll say, you know what? You need to send us a list of everything that you have, and then we could give you a detailed quote. So I painstakingly went through the work of literally labeling every single item I owned at the time, which, yeah, it's not a lot because I was a grad student, but it's still a lot of stuff. I put them into boxes, I packed everything, and then I made a list of, okay, large moving boxes, these are the dimensions, I have 15 of them. I have 1 keyboard, I have 3 laptops, desktops, etc., and I just labeled every single item. And then they look over and then they say, okay, it'll be $1,700. This is one of the catches. A moving company, to able to give you an actual estimate for their moving services, should be able to come and see your stuff or give you an estimate based on square footage. So this is something that I learned later on after I walked into the scam. But if you look at their quote unquote binding argument or the binding contract, it actually says on the very fine print on the bottom, this actually does not constitute the amount of stuff or the amount of square footage, and things could vary once we weigh the item. Okay, so the binding quote is not a binding quote, which is, okay, there's the misleading language. But anyway, they'll take your estimate, they'll give you some number, and what they do, instead of saying, if they had their own fleet, they would say, hey, driver A, you need to show up in Delaware on November 27th, and you need to put all this stuff here, and then you need to start driving to LA. No, instead what they do is, I don't know how exactly it works, but they auction it off to people. They auction it off to these companies that have vans, that have drivers, and they say, okay, who wants to take this to LA? And let's say there was a car going from Delaware to Colorado. The driver might bid on that and say, hey, I could take that to Colorado for $1,000. They say, sold. All right, from Colorado, who wants to take it? Somebody's like, oh, different van line company. They might be like, hey, I could take it from Colorado to Washington. Does it make sense for LA move? No, but they don't care. So then they're like, okay, sold, because we still want to just keep it going. So you're going to go from Colorado to Washington. That's great. Any other takers? Separate driver, separate van line company might be like, hey, actually, I'm going from Washington to Oregon. Does that work? And they'd be like, yeah, that's great. Sold for another $1,000. So what you end up actually getting is multiple van lines coordinating, barely coordinating, but just handling your stuff left and right. And so there's multiple transportation stops happening and transfers happening. Now, what do you think would happen if you had a box labeled fragile or valuable? They will open it. No one's looking, right? It's just an easy way for someone with bad thoughts to act upon their bad intentions. So I gave them this detailed list of things I own. And I was so honest to a point where I said, oh, by the way, I forgot a small moving box. Can you add this to the quote? And they kept increasing that quote, right? Every time I thought of something that I forgot to include in that list. But a real moving company that's actually doing the move, one, should have their own fleet. Two, probably their own drivers that are working for that company, not contracted out from some other company for that specific leg of the trip. And three, they should actually give you an estimate based on what they see. So they'll either come out, they'll send a field agent and walk through the house with you so they can get a feel for how much stuff you actually have. Or they will ask you the detailed square footage of the home that you have. I've heard of companies doing FaceTime so they can walk through virtually with you. But these broker companies don't actually do that. And what happens is they'll not give you any information on who's going to do your move. They'll just keep saying, oh, you'll find out, closer to the move date. Here's the catch. These brokerage companies require a very, very high deposit up front, and you can only cancel it within 72 hours or a very short window of actually paying the deposit. So how would you, as a consumer, know that your move is going to if your move is going completely down the drain unless you've actually experienced it, right? So they say 72 hours you can cancel, but so for me, I thought, oh, that's great. I'm hoping to find information about who's moving my stuff and like what the driver's name is, what the itinerary and the route is. Like, please send that over. As soon as I paid my deposit, the communication drops. Like, they start evading questions. They stop answering certain questions related to the itinerary. And then the 72-hour passes and I'm thinking, ooh, is something wrong? But they're like, no. Like, you'll find more information closer to the day of. And their goal is for you to be left with basically zero choices. Oftentimes people have a very set moving date where they have to be out of their house or their apartment by that certain time or that certain date. And so by the time you're finding out that these movers have only coordinated like a brokerage and not actually have sent over drivers, you're too late because you need to get out of that place anyway. And you need to be at the new place, let's say on a given time. So they're pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. I thought it was a little fishy, but I was like, okay, maybe they'll just send me more information the week of. Now, like 2 days before the move. And this was tricky because I was international. Like, I was back home enjoying my little time off right before I started this new job, starting in LA. And I'm starting to get really nervous. They're starting to not take my calls. I email them and they don't actually respond. When they do respond, it's like a fake reassurance and no actual information in the responses. So I'm like, okay, this is a little weird. And that's when I start Googling moving scams. And all of this information started coming out. And so basically what I've heard happen is, let's say you did wait until they came. They'll give you a really narrow window and they'll say, a really wide window the day of. And they'll say, oh, we'll show up sometime between 8 a.m. to, I don't know, 3 p.m., 5 p.m. You're waiting. You hear that someone is coming. You maybe you have a name for the driver or a name for the actual fleet, but you're given limited information. They show up and they say, actually, this is like not really the stuff that we received from the quote. It seems like there's more stuff. And then they ask you for cash, or they say there's a discrepancy on the weight. So what they'll do is they'll actually load it and then they will drive to a weighing station and then say, actually, your stuff, it said it was going to be, for example, 500 pounds, but we actually ended up weighing 700 pounds. And you need to pay $500 cash extra. They'll do things like that. But at that point, the stuff has already been loaded. And so then they're going to charge you an offloading fee if you ask them to offload it. Or the chances are you actually need to just get out of that apartment because that apartment lease has just ended. And you have no choice but to just pay them $500 cash and let them drive off with your stuff. So the weigh station thing, I've heard quite a bit. They won't even have like records of the weigh station, or they'll like soft pack your stuff to like bulk up the weight. So those are like very they're extorting money, and it's tactics that I have seen over and over again in Reddit forums. And I've heard many anecdotes from other academics or other grad students when they were moving this move. And so, well, let's say you did get the stuff unloaded onto the vans, and let's say you did pay a small fee. They say it's going to arrive in a week. It never does. And they say, the broker company says, oh, we just can't, there's unforeseen circumstances. Once it's loaded onto a truck, we actually don't know where it is exactly or who takes care of it after. Months go by. And by that point, people will have taken a flight or have driven already to their new place. And they're taking advantage of the fact that this is a cross-country move. So when the truck goes off grid, it goes off grid, right? And so by that time, people are waiting for their stuff at the new place for months on end, several weeks. I've heard months as well. And because all their stuff is with them, they have to keep buying new stuff just to like get by. Finally, the van arrives and you say, okay, take the stuff off. They say, well, there's actually an offload fee. The move was a little bit more tricky than we had anticipated, or they'll straight up it's not gaslight, but what is it? Threaten you, that they're going to drive off if you don't pay the fee. And by that point, you're so desperate. Like, imagine waiting 2 months for your stuff to arrive. You just want to get your stuff back. So they might ask you for, again, a cash payment, and you pay them, and then they offload the stuff and you find out some of it has been damaged or has been stolen. Now, okay, what about the broker company? Like, you paid the deposit and there's a remainder fee, right? Of course, you pay all of those fees as well. And so the fees that I'm talking about when the driver is threatening you, those are extra cash fees that is not within this contract. So they drive you into these points of desperation where you just feel like you have no other choice but to go by this person's request. There's this thing called moving insurance, and they'll say, would you like to pay for moving insurance? And I've seen scams related to that. I mean, if you've already seen how dishonest they are with their business practice, you can't expect them to be honest when it comes to moving insurance. But what happens is you either get the money back by weight, or you get the money back by kind of like, the actual value of purchase. But I don't know of anyone who has receipts for every single item that they own. Oftentimes you hold it for maybe the 30 days, you might return it, but after that, the receipt is gone. So if you end up losing something, then unless you could provide a receipt and you could provide that it has been damaged or stolen within the move, you don't actually get any money back. And if it's by weight, let's say I lost a jewelry piece, those things don't weigh that much, but it costs a lot of money. So they maybe give you 10 cents for something, right? So that's how these moving broker companies will scam people. And their business model is basically just to get your deposit. You may not pay them the rest of the funds by the time you catch on, but they've already taken off with your deposit, and they just scam people over and over again. So now, that's how this business works. There are other good moving companies, though, which I'll talk about towards the end, maybe alternative ways to move. But second part, how did I then get out of this mess? Now, I was very limited on funds. I was a grad student going into my first postdoc. And so you don't have a lot of money racked up in your account. I had already paid them the deposit, and I was starting to catch on that this was a scam maybe 72 hours before my move when I was abroad. So you can imagine the level of panic I had. But this scam really allowed me to see how much of a detective I could be. And I was like, I did this work, researching everything, and I put together a report that was about 30 pages long. And that served two purposes. One was to send it to my organization who is paying for my relocation expenses. Because then I was like, hey, I signed on with this company, I paid the deposit, but if I keep going, I think we're all going to lose more money and I'm just not going to get my stuff back. So can you actually cover the deposit and while I look for alternative ways? So I had to put together a report kind of explaining everything. So that was the first purpose. Second purpose was eventually this report went to my credit card company, who did end up taking the fight for me. So that may be a cop out. You might say this is a cop out, like you had the credit card company pay you back, but you still, as a consumer, have to, if you're reporting a fraudulent charge, you still have to kind of equip your company, your credit card company, to go after this, this company. And there has to be an actual basis of why you're claiming that this is a fraudulent charge or a fraudulent business. And so that's how I used it. And I am going to go through kind of what I used. So as soon as I found out they were a scam and I had all of this confirmation coming from me left and right, I sent them a cease and desist email. I did this because I was abroad, but as soon as I landed back in the US, I sent them a physical copy that was signed, and the cease and desist letter was tracked. And so there would be records, like public records, or I guess USPS records of when this mail traveled through and was and arrived. Like I have a record that they received it. I can't remember if I notarized the letter or if I did any extra layer of work for it, but basically I just wrote a cease and desist letter, and I cited things like, in your language, when you were communicating with me, you said you would be providing the driver information a week before the move. It is now 3 days before the move. I still do not have any information on the driver. And I basically had to say, as a broker company, you did not do your brokerage job. So therefore, I am terminating this contract and I would like to move forward with a cancellation. And then they said, oh, actually, for 72 days or 72 hours after you pay the deposit, that's when you get a full cancellation. But after that, you just get credit. So they're going to keep my money is basically what they're saying. And I said, I have no intention of doing business with you. So please go ahead and refund the amount. You'll be hearing back from me soon. Or I think I said something like, please cancel everything. So I wrote the cease and desist, communicated them via email as well as physical mail, and made sure to keep all the responses and the receipts from that. And then I did a little bit of digging, and I went to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So that's the FMCSA. And they have a website, and they have a section where you can look for motor companies and you can look for movers and their businesses. So I looked up the group, the moving group that I had signed with, and then I got their MC number, which is like their motor carrier number, I think, and then also their business number that was affiliated with the U.S. Department of Transportation. Now, when you have those numbers, what really helps is then you can use those numbers to like look up all of their records. And if you actually go to the FMCSA and look up the business record, you'll then be able to see all of the complaints that have been filed against that business, I think for that year. And there were already numerous cases filed against them. So had I known that this is kind of an option for me or something that I needed to do due diligence on, I would have done that. I did, but nobody told me, right? And so I looked up their number, and then I saw that there were these complaints for, let's see, I'm going through the document I wrote right now. Oh, okay. So charges, they had these estimated charges that were incorrect. They had weighing, claims related to weighing and fraudulent, inflation of the weight. They actually had 2 cases of hostage situations, 14 complaints for pickup and delivery, loss and damage 5. There's 6 complaints for different, commercial complaints as well. So there were tons of complaints filed against this company just in the year of 2019 alone that was showing up in the FMCSA website. So I took a screenshot of that and said, okay, this is showing, this is supporting evidence that this company has malpractice and it's basically not a satisfactory company. And because it was a broker company, I had to go with the angle of saying they haven't fulfilled their brokerage jobs, and on the other side that they're practicing they have business malpractice because they're marketing themselves as if they are a moving company. So those were the 2 angles that I took in putting together this document to kind of go after them. So I said, these are the malpractices. They're a broker company. They coordinate moves, but they make it look like they're the actual fleet. For that, I actually pulled up all the text messages where the agent's language was signifying that they would be doing the move. Although, now that we found out, they don't do any of the move. So I said the language things like, oh, yes, we can move, or yes, we can do this, instead of saying, yes, I can organize drivers. Yes, I can coordinate drivers. They said, we will move and we can move. So I caught that language and I said, they're a broker company. They can't move anything. Pulled up the records for the company and it said they own 0 fleet. And I put that together and said, they're a broker company lying and posing to be a moving company. And also look at the amount of claims. So those are the things that I pulled together. And then in their quote unquote binding contract, I said, they use estimated items to estimate the service rather than the actual square footage or an actual walkthrough. And I even pulled up, that's actually against federal regulations. So they messed with the wrong girl. I mean, I just passionately hate things like this. If you're this smart to evade people, just figure out a better business plan and actually do the work, right? But so I wrote all of these things. And then the other part that I brought in was the fraudulent Google reviews. I went through all of the Google reviews for this moving company and I caught the language where people said, oh, the movers from this company did a really great job, or, oh, the trucks from this company, arrived on time. But it can't be true because they actually don't own any movers and they don't own any trucks. So there would be no branding associated whatsoever with the movers or the trucks that show up for these quote unquote people that had successful interactions with them. So I started to pull all these reviews that were clearly fake. Scattered within the 5 to 4 star reviews, you see the 1 star reviews where say this company is an absolute scam. So you start to see this pattern, and it's like this bimodal distribution of people who are fake giving 5 stars that clearly in their language denote that it's a fake, review, and then the 1 star reviews of the people that got scammed. In the reviews, people had said they will load the stuff and then they'll demand money that is beyond my quote. And this, kind of the exhortation skill that I had told you before. But the amount was very important because according to Code of Federal Regulations, it is illegal to demand more money or revise the estimate beyond the original code by 110%. And these people are requesting like 37% of the revised estimate or even more of the original estimate, And so in the reviews, I found this language where people had put these amounts like, 25% more than the actual estimate. And I said, this is clear indication that these motor carrier, this brokerage company organizes things with motor carriers who are clearly charging beyond the 10% increase that is legal. Let's see what the actual code is. It is, the Code of Regulations is 49 and then section 375.403A7. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if I'm reading this quote unquote address of the regulation correctly, but it basically says if the motor carrier loads the shipment without first taking one of these steps, then their original binding estimate is affirmed by operation of law. Meaning, if they don't agree with you that they're going to increase the quote by 110%, like the 110% is a cap, and they try to do something else, then we have to actually abide by the binding estimate. Okay, so that was another point that I had brought up. Moving forward, I also said the large deposit is a problem. This is just kind of colloquial knowledge or nominal knowledge that's kind of out there in the Reddit forums with people who have interacted with real legit moving companies, and they say because there's so much to the move that is uncertain, for example, like the exact weight of your stuff, they'll usually actually ask for less of a deposit, so less than 25% of the overall estimate. But I ended up paying nearly 40% of my quote as the deposit on the binding contract, which again, is not binding because they will inflate the price anyway for you. So I said, this is, quite kind of outside the code of operations that are often done for these moving companies. Again, that's a point of suspicion. Now, this is actually really funny. So you're going through all of this thing, and they, for the most part, these scammers make it almost invincible, or they have this invincible cover. But keep in mind that these are companies trying to make quick and easy money. So they're not very thorough, and they made a mistake. So when they sent me their estimate, on the bottom of that estimate sheet, there's like this little like URL link. I guess that's printed as part of the software package that's used to provide the estimate. So imagine you write something in Word document, and then on the bottom there's like a gray lettering that says prepared by MS Word doc or whatever. So it was something like that. So in that, there was a name that was not the company that I was dealing with, and it was actually a different company. I was like, there has to be something here. This is a little bit weird. Let me look into this. And so what I did is I looked up the address of the moving brokerage company, and I looked at all of the businesses that had been associated with that address. And what I find out is, first of all, this quote unquote address of this company was like, it was like not even like a real office. Like I went to Google Street View and I was like, this is just a regular strip mall, and there's no signage of the business whatsoever. And that's what they'll do. They'll have some kind of generic address with no branding, with no signage indicating that this is like the X moving broker company, because their goal is to just, churn out all the scams, get enough of a deposit. And when the complaints actually reach a limit and the federal association just kind of looks at it and is like, okay, you're suspended, don't do business, then they just change the name of the business and just keep going with this new identity. And so with that address, I had found a different moving company that was there before. I highly suspect they're the same entity, but it was a different name. And what I could see is that they were officially out of business in 2018, 2019 era. But when you go to their Google reviews, there were reviews coming in as recent as like a week before. So I took screenshots of all of that and said, okay, by the way, like they sent me this, estimate. On the bottom here, there's a different business name. When you look at the address and when you look for this business, here's that business that says it's been out of business since 2018, early 2019. But you look at this business's Google page and they're getting reviews from a week ago and they're 5 stars. And you could clearly tell then it's a fake Google review. So I had put that in the document as well, saying, okay, I mean, all signs are pointing to the fact that this business is fraudulent. It's a scam. It's fraudulent. All of these practices are very sketchy. So, I mean, I hope I kind of wish I had listed this in the podcast as I'm speaking through. So I don't know how confusing this is for people listening. Obviously, for me, I'm following the document in front of my eyes. So it feels orderly, but I'll try to organize this a little bit better in the description or in my website. Okay, then I had a section on other signs of malpractice and fake advertising. And I said, I basically went after the language in their website. So they had a website. It looked very generic, but because they're a broker company, they actually can't claim to be a moving company, because then that's a direct violation of their company identity, right? So I went to their website and I grabbed all of the language that indicated that they were actually the movers for your stuff. Again, because these people are just interested in quick money, they're not very thorough. They copied and pasted all the text from, different websites, different moving companies. If you actually Google, well, what I did was I dragged and copied and Googled like the exact wording on their website, showed up in 15 different moving company websites. Like, that's how common these moving brokerage scams are. And they don't even bother to edit. Like, come on, at least make it like more specific to your scam company. But they didn't go through the work. And so I grabbed text where it says our movers or our vans and, things like that. Or we have people ready. We have vans ready. Like language like that. I just highlighted and said, this is actually, false advertising. And the photos that they used in their website, I did a reverse image search on Google. I'm starting to progressively sound crazy because of the amount of research that I did as I speak on this podcast. But sometimes you gotta beat these people with your crazies. And this is when I really felt like my calling as an academic, because I was like, oh, by the way, I put this together before I got on the flight to the US, literally pulling an all-nighter. Like eight hours before I got on the flight, I was like starting to put this together. In like 4 to 5 hours, I put together the 30 pages. So like, don't mess with me, Don't mess with researchers. They will go deep. They'll go deep. Anyway, so I put this together. Did a reverse image search, and I found all these generic photos and like these stock photos that they were using on their website. And I said, this is actually indicative of, them trying to provide a very generic website. There's no real staff released on the website. All these photos are stock images. There's no branding whatsoever with the text or with the photos on their website. This is just, it's very indicative of them trying to make something very generic to mislead the customer. So I had said that. Okay, so moving forward here, I'm going to skip through. I had the fake reviews. Oh, and then the previous business name. I put a section on the previous business name and then the generic branding. Yes. Okay. The one more thing that I put in was when I looked up their record at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, this was probably the most telling of them all, or maybe the most legally powerful. Their insurance was actually running out as a business. So I said, you know what? By the way, they're doing this move for me in like T-2 days, supposedly. But even before my move is done, like even before the supposed move should be done, like let's say if they promised a week, even before that week is up, their insurance is going to run out. And there's like all of this like redlining is saying, oh, their insurance is running out. They haven't renewed it. And it was just like a telltale sign, they're going to not renew the insurance. They're going to dip and my stuff is going to be in the hands of somebody I don't know. And I'm just going to lose all my stuff. And, we have pretty good evidence saying that they're not going to finish this move in a week. So this is just not working out. So all that to say, I put together this document. The organization that was paying for my relocation benefit actually couldn't help me in that and said, we need receipts, to kind of like cover these costs, and it has to be related to your move. So if you're just losing the deposit, we really can't reimburse you on that. So then I turned to my credit card company. I did talk to someone, a lawyer through, I think it's called moverrescue.com. This is not sponsored by anything, sponsored by anyone. I actually also don't know how good they are anymore. Like I received this help around, like already 4 years ago. So I don't know if they're still around. But they're run by two reputable moving companies, Mayflower and I think is a United Van Lines. But they are actually legit companies that will come out, they'll pack. You see the physical agents from that company come and do the move on their physical vessels that they own. But they basically started this website because so many people were getting scammed by these broker companies. But I spoke to someone there. I got really lucky and got connected to someone who I think was like an attorney that was volunteering his time. And he said, okay, we've tried everything. Like we did all the right steps for like writing the cease and desist. They're probably not going to send you back your deposit. The only way that you could kind of pursue this is through your credit card company. I can't remember if I mentioned this already in the podcast, but the reason I didn't call the police, or the reason police are sometimes, oftentimes not useful in these situations, is because it's a civil matter and not a criminal matter. That was the advice that I got from some people, including some of these discussion threads about people trying to tell you how they navigated a bit. But there was somebody who had called the police when these moving guys had loaded the stuff and was kind of like demanding more money. Police showed up, but unless there was a physical violent encounter, the police actually couldn't do anything because there is this quote unquote soft contract that you had already signed. They're oftentimes not gonna be really familiar with the federal regulations surrounding the move charge. Like, for example, they're not going to know, oh, you can't charge more than 110% of the original estimate. And even then, like, the guys who loaded your stuff are probably not associated with the brokerage company in that way. So the contract basically is establishing the relationship between you and the broker company, but not with whoever the broker company brought on. So then it becomes this like civil mess. The police can't actually do anything about it. The only thing they can do is maybe protect you from actual physical violence. So I got advice from moverrescue.com, the attorney there. He said, why don't you try with your credit card company? Now, I was very lucky that I did put this on my credit card. I then compiled everything even more clearly. Like I put even more comments on it, because somebody from my credit card company probably doesn't understand the nuances of these things. And I sent it over. I think it was probably 6 months later that I got my deposit back. So it took a very long time. But if you are in the middle of something like this, I want to encourage you that there are forums out there that can help you. I do suggest talking to a lawyer if you can. The general feeling that I got was, well, yeah, I could legally pursue them, but it's actually just like a waste of my time and money because, it's just a lot. It's just a lot to go through, and they're very sneaky with their language. So unless you go from an angle of like false advertising or they didn't deliver the broker service, you can't actually go after their mode of business, like the brokerage model itself. That was kind of what I heard. Obviously, things could be different case by case. So I encourage you to go through every avenue possible. And hopefully this kind of helps you figure out what kind of legal things to look for, or what kind of records on the company you want to look for. Okay, lastly, how did I actually move then? So I was emotionally spent from this, and I had maybe like 24 to 48 hours to coordinate a different method of move to LA once I landed in Delaware. And so I actually looked up these U-Haul pods, and I think there are a lot of other pod companies now too. And I don't know if U-Haul still does them. Well, why don't we check U-Haul pods? It seems like they still do them. So they're called U-Boxes, I guess. And so what I did was I rented these little pod things, and what you do is you load them yourself. So you load all your stuff into these like boxes or pods or whatever it's called, but it's like basically this tall storage thing that they haul on their trucks, and it's a pretty, I think for my apartment, which had maybe 2-bedroom worth of stuff. Like I lived in a house, and so I had 1 bedroom completely full with all my furniture and stuff, and then I had some extra kitchen stuff, etc. I was able to get by with renting just 1 box, U-Box or pod or whatever they call it now. And the good thing is they're very, very cheap because you kind of do the work of packing. You can hire local movers to help you with the loading, which I did. I did on both ends. And so I had people come out and help me load it into the box. I locked it. And because of this experience, I didn't trust anybody. So I bought a GPS tracker. So I bought two, actually. I bought two GPS trackers. You pay like a very small fee to use their tracking service. It's like a monthly fee. And obviously, if they're in like a signal dead zone, you're not going to see anything. But when they do enter a different zone with signal, you'll be able to see the last record. So I bought two. I put one up in the pod inside it with my furniture and activated it. I put one in my car because my car was also being coordinated to be moved by a different moving company, or this was a specifically car moving company, and I had already worked with them before and they're very reliable. So I ended up finding that information again and going with them. So then U-Haul does all of the transportation. So they transported it out to LA, dropped it off in one of the U-Haul centers, and they said, hey, come pick this up, or we can deliver it to your door. And you then coordinate movers to help you unload and kind of bring all the stuff into your house. So that's what I did. It ended up being way cheaper. It was a little bit more, I think, of an effort because you have to kind of figure out the other legs of the move. Like you have to figure out which movers you're going to get locally at both ends of the trip. But I felt way better doing it because one, I had that tracker, and two, it's with a bigger company that and they have branches all over US. So that ended up being a really good option for me. Another tip for moving, if you are moving domestically or locally, this is a good option for you. You could use, you could rent these plastic bins that are stackable rather than buying boxes or trying to scramble to buy boxes. You buy these plastic bins and you just dump all your stuff and you load those into the box or the U-Pod. Sorry, I don't know what they're called, and I don't think it matters because I'm not advertising for them, just giving you information. Everybody can Google. So sorry I keep messing up the name. But that is incredibly easy because you don't have to like assemble the boxes. Oftentimes if it's through U-Haul or some other big moving company or some other like office company, they'll have drop-off locations that are nearby. Obviously, if it's within the city, you don't have to worry about, the drop-off. You just go back to the place you picked them up from. But for me, the cross-country move, I would have to figure out, okay, like where can I drop these off once I do move to LA? So you do want to look for bigger companies that do that kind of stuff, not just a local company. Okay, so I think that's all the stuff that I have for moving scams. And I'm really hoping from the bottom of my heart that this prevents some people or helps some people navigate these scams or not have to ever deal with them again. So with that, it has been a very fruitful episode for me because I've been wanting to get this out there for a long time. And thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!